Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Sherwin Hariri, and I'm a board-certified allergist and clinical immunologist in Los Angeles, California. I decided to do this YouTube video because of an overwhelming number of questions from both my patients and my colleagues about the COVID-19 vaccine that just got emergency approval from the FDA literally hours ago. Patients and colleagues are both relieved and a little bit worried about this new vaccine. And I want to tell you that I'm actually overwhelmingly excited about this technologically advanced vaccine, which only took about 8 to 9 months to develop, but that does not mean that it is not safe. I'm also excited that it's extremely effective, it looks like. And tomorrow morning, our hospital, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, will be one of the first places probably in the city and the country to get the vaccine. And healthcare workers, as you might know, will be one of the first to be offered the vaccine. First, the frontline healthcare workers, and I cannot wait to get my vaccine. There are several questions that come up when you're talking about a new vaccine, especially a vaccine that was given emergency approval in this horrible pandemic. And I really want to go over some of these questions and try to answer them to the best of my knowledge. One of the main questions is, what is this vaccine? What is it made out of? And basically, is it safe? Well, first of all, we know that the Pfizer as well as the Mrna vaccine, which will probably get approval pretty soon as well, days, maybe weeks from now, they're both an mRNA vaccine. So what this is the vaccine has a little bit of an RNA, a little genetic code that encodes or is the code for a protein called a spike or S protein. As you might know, the coronavirus has these little spikes that you see, and the virus uses the spikes to get entry into our cells. So if you get infected with COVID or with the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, and end up getting COVID, the disease, the virus used that spike protein, those little spikes, to get inside your cells and start replicating, right? And that's what we want to avoid. Well, this mRNA vaccine has the code for the protein, the spike protein. And when you get the vaccine, your body will start making that same protein, which then will trigger your immune system to make an antibody to that protein. But what's so smart about the vaccine, like most vaccines, is that you get the immune response, the protection, without actually getting the virus or the disease. So first of all, it's 95% effective. So in 70,000 or so human beings, 70,000 who were in the trials, there were no severe cases of COVID. And what it did, it basically decreased the severity of disease in the people that were vaccinated compared to the placebo. Not only were there very few cases, there were no severe cases, but the cases that were seen were also mild. This is exciting technology because in the last 8 to 9 months, we achieved something that we usually achieve in a decade. But I want you to know, even though that the mRNA virus is a newer technology, it's not completely new to medicine. It's been around for over a decade. mRNA vaccines have been researched and have been tried to be developed for the Zika virus, as well as the influenza virus and some other viruses, CMV, etc. And in the end, we ended up not needing a virus or a Zika virus vaccine because Zika went away on its own. And so even though we've never had an approved mRNA virus, this technology has existed for quite some time. And what we did is, what the researchers did is they use the genetic code that we got from the coronavirus, that little RNA, and they plugged it into an existing technology. And that is why we were able to make this vaccine pretty quickly. The virus needs that spike protein, right, to gain entry into the cell. And by getting the antibody to that spike protein through the vaccine, you basically are stopping the virus from getting into the cell. And so getting a little bit of genetic information through a vaccine is not considered to be dangerous based on, research now for years in the other types of mRNA virus vaccines that were being looked into, but also based on these fairly large trials. The next question is, that comes up a lot, can mRNA stay in my cells? Absolutely not. It cannot take over your cells. It cannot get into your genetics. mRNA cannot make DNA. So RNA is a short-lived message that you will give your cells, and the vaccine mRNA cannot even get into the nucleus, into the core of the cell. It stays outside of the nucleus for hours only. And we actually have to put the RNA in fats, like little lipids, to be able to get the vaccine into our cells. So the mRNA will only stay for hours, and what it'll do is it'll give the code to your body to make the little proteins, the S proteins, not the whole virus, just that protein. It cannot get incorporated into your genes. It cannot do anything like that. It's not going to alter your DNA. That's a scientific fact. And so it's really important to know that the mRNA is not going to do anything to your genes or your DNA. Well, the next question then that comes up a lot is, can the vaccine give me COVID-19? Absolutely not, right? Because first of all, this is not a live vaccine. We have no viral particles. We have nothing from the virus. We only have a genetic code, the mRNA, for one part of the virus. It's an important part, the part that helps the virus get into your cells, but we don't have any live or dead virus in this vaccine. So the vaccine cannot give you COVID-19. As a matter of fact, when you get infected with SARS-CoV-2, right, with the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus, and you get COVID-19, what the virus does is it actually injects its genetic material into your cell. That's not what the vaccine does, right? It only gives the mRNA, which is a temporary message, and that stays in the cytoplasm outside of the nucleus of the cell. So again, no viral particles in the Pfizer and Mrna vaccines, and so there's no way that you can actually get COVID-19. You're just getting one protein, which is the antibody, and that antibody cannot replicate, the mRNA cannot replicate, and you need replication for the virus to cause the disease. Another question is, can the COVID vaccine lead to sterility or cause any infertility issues? Absolutely not. Nothing in science that we know of would make the mRNA that you get to one protein cause any infertility problems. There's no evidence of that. And interestingly, in our daily lives, what we do see often is we are exposed to proteins and we make antibodies to multiple proteins, secondary to infections and viruses, etc. So the notion of this causing infertility is just not validated, and it's just not true from what we know about this mRNA technology. A question that's extremely important that has come up especially from my patients, but also colleagues, is about allergies and getting the vaccine. So, can someone with allergies still get the vaccine safely? The answer is yes to most patients, if not almost all patients with allergies. So, first of all, if you are an allergy patient of mine or of anyone's, but you're on allergy shots because you have environmental allergies, allergies to pollen, to dust, to cats, to dogs, to any other pets, then you can safely get this vaccine. If you are a patient who has food allergies and you've even had anaphylaxis, life-threatening allergies to peanuts, to shellfish, or to any other food, then you may still get this vaccine safely. If you have a history of allergies to any medication, but it's a pill, not an injection, and you've had a penicillin allergy, let's say, or any other antibiotic allergy, or you have a severe allergy to Advil or any other pill medicine, you should be able to still safely get this vaccine. So people with mild, moderate allergies, or even severe allergies to environmental allergens, to foods, to latex, to certain pills, should completely safely be able to get the vaccine without any other interventions. Now, any medicine and any vaccine in general can cause allergic reactions, but we don't think, based on what we know, and based on a lot that we know about vaccines in general, that having allergic rhinitis or environmental allergies or hay fever or food allergies is going to put you at risk. Just like with any of the other vaccines that most of you have gotten, like the flu vaccine or like the tetanus shot or the Shingrix or shingles vaccine or any of your childhood vaccines, even if you had allergies to foods or environmentals, we never recommended you not to get that vaccine. The same goes for the COVID vaccine. Now, I know that most of you are worried about the report of 2 patients after the trials. None of the patients in the trials had anaphylaxis because they had allergies, but 2 patients who had a history of anaphylaxis, so severe allergic reactions to medications previously, had anaphylaxis to this vaccine. Well, first of all, allergic reactions may happen with any medicine, including a vaccine. And sometimes there's no way of predicting who will get the reaction. But these people had a history of severe anaphylaxis and were carrying an epinephrine pen. So the modified recommendation then for patients with allergies is as follows. If you have had a severe life-threatening allergic reaction like anaphylaxis to an injectable medication like an IV medicine or an intramuscular, or subcutaneous, a medicine that was a shot, and you truly had anaphylaxis, then you still likely can get this vaccine. But we would want to take some precautions, or we might want to wait a little longer. This does not hold true, again, for patients with regular common environmental and food allergies or even allergies to pills. So the only time that you absolutely should not get this new COVID vaccine is if you're allergic to what is in it. If you have a documented severe allergy, anaphylaxis, to what is in this vaccine. Well, what's in this vaccine is the mRNA itself, which is very unlikely for you to be allergic to. But there are a couple of other allergens in there, or products in there, and one of them is polyethylene glycol. That one is an allergenic product, and if you've had allergies to polyethylene glycol that you know of, and if it were anaphylaxis, then you shouldn't take this vaccine. In regards to patients with other severe anaphylaxis to any other medications, IV or intramuscular, so any other injectable medications, You should see your allergist, and we should talk about that. And you can also talk to your primary care doctor about this. But what you should do is you should probably still get the vaccine after a conversation with your doctor with a 30 to maybe 60-minute period of observation after getting the vaccine. We also might pre-medicate, so give you Benadryl or Tylenol before getting the vaccine, which you can always do to prevent allergic reactions, but we have no data. We don't know if that's going to affect the efficiency of the vaccine, if it's somehow not going to make the vaccine do what it's supposed to do if you took a lot of medicines to prevent allergic reactions before the vaccine. It is probably not going to hurt you to take Benadryl. It can make you drowsy. You should know that that can happen, obviously. But if you take Benadryl or Tylenol and you're not allergic to Benadryl or Tylenol, before the vaccine, 30 minutes to 60 minutes before, it might prevent some of the milder allergic reactions, and it might even somewhat help prevent a more severe reaction, although it is not necessarily recommended, and the CDC is not recommending that you pre-medicate with these medications, because we won't know if it's affecting, or we don't know yet if it would affect the efficacy of the vaccine. Now, you obviously should have an EpiPen with you if you have a history of severe anaphylaxis, and you should be monitored in the doctor's office. But again, the only people who have allergies to an injectable medicine those are the only patients. If you're a patient with allergies to an injectable shot medication, then and you've had anaphylaxis, then you should talk to your doctor, and you could probably still get the vaccine with some modifications. We would watch you longer, etc. Otherwise, anyone else with any other allergies, please don't think twice about taking the vaccine. Another question that is extremely important and comes up is if patients with autoimmune diseases can get this vaccine safely. Every time you trigger the immune system with a vaccine or an infection or anything that triggers the immune system to make antibodies, so either B cells or a T cell response, so antibodies or cellular immune responses. So the difference, by the way, between antibodies and the cellular immune responses is that the vaccine and the disease will initially make these antibodies, but then you're hoping that the antibodies that your body makes from the vaccine, that it'll, so to speak, class switch and make memory T cells, so make a memory immune response. So the efficacy won't get less and less. We don't know yet how long this vaccine will stay efficient, or how efficient it will be, and for how long it'll offer immunity. But we are hoping that, and we're thinking that it will remain very efficacious after the 2 doses that are recommended. So this new COVID vaccine, you need 2 doses, 21 days apart. And talking about autoimmune patients, well, in the study, in the trials, phase 1, 2, and 3 trials, we had both autoimmune patients as well as HIV patients, and the numbers weren't huge, but those patients did fine. And what we know about autoimmune patients is that, a small percentage might react more strongly and might have a flare of their disease, but there's nothing to suggest that you cannot take this mRNA vaccine. First of all, it is not live. So if you have a compromised immune system, so an immunodeficiency, because of an autoimmune disease or because of a primary, just an immunodeficiency, you can still take it because it's not live. And then there is a very slight likelihood of a flare of your disease, but it most likely will not cause a flare. And another thing is that we've seen patients with autoimmune diseases get COVID, and it is not causing a flare in most of those patients. So if the actual COVID-19 disease is not really causing flares in autoimmune patients, then getting the vaccine with just a tiny bit of one of the proteins is probably not going to cause a flare. There's still a very small chance, but the consensus is that autoimmune patients as well as immunosuppressed patients should get the vaccine. Now, another question is, will these patients with a weaker immune system be able to mount a response? Will the vaccine work in these people and be effective? We don't know, but we think it will in most people. But it depends on if you can make the antibodies. It's not going to hurt you, though, to get the vaccine, and you probably should after talking to your own physician, your rheumatologist, and your allergist. The other question then that comes up is pregnancy and breastfeeding and getting the vaccine. We all know that even though rare, in pregnancy, severe disease, very severe COVID-19, critical illness is more likely than when you're not pregnant. Even though most patients will do okay, they can get really sick. There is no data, safety data or any data on patients in pregnancy and getting this vaccine, not in the trials. But if you're a healthcare worker, or if you're an essential worker, or if you are a patient with a pre-existing condition and you're pregnant, then it is most likely safe to get this vaccine. And it's a discussion you'll have to have with your physician. If you're pregnant, you do have to talk to your doctor. And if you're breastfeeding, you should talk to your doctor. But most likely, lactating and pregnant women will be able to get this mRNA vaccine, and most likely it will be safe, only because we know that COVID-19 itself usually, not always, usually doesn't cross the placenta and cause harm to the baby. So an mRNA vaccine that is just going to help you make the protein, one of the proteins of the coronavirus, should not do anything. And it's not a live vaccine. It is not going to cause COVID. You might get the side effects, and you might have to take some Tylenol, etc. And so during pregnancy, we don't always like to give you medications, but we'll have to look at the risks versus the benefits. Some other questions that I've gotten, well, one of the most important ones here is side effects. So we have seen in the trials that generally this is a very safe vaccine. Common side effects. So no significant side effects, no death from the vaccine, no severe side effects, no COVID-19 from getting the vaccine. However, local injection site reactions were common. Getting mRNA into your cells is not easy. And so you can get localized reactions, and putting an ice pack or taking some over-the-counter Advil or Tylenol might be very helpful if okay with your doctor and if you're not allergic to those medicines. Other really common side effects, minor side effects, but common, are fever, headaches, fatigue, and muscle aches, usually for a couple of days after the vaccination, 1, 2, 3 days. So those can also be treated with over-the-counter medications like NSAIDs. NSAIDs are Advil, ibuprofen, Motrin. You can do it with Tylenol. The few days of having these side effects are probably much better than having symptoms from COVID. Now you could say, well, some people are asymptomatic, right? You can get coronavirus and not get the COVID-19 disease, be asymptomatic. Yes, but we just don't know how likely it is for you to be asymptomatic. And the risks of the virus are much less than the risks of the vaccine seem to be much less than the risks of getting the disease, and also the risks of getting the disease and potentially giving it to your loved ones in your household, your spouses, your parents, your grandparents, and your kids. Another question that comes up often is, do I need to get the vaccine if I already have had COVID-19, or if I had asymptomatic positive tests, or if I have the antibodies? I didn't even know I had the coronavirus. I was infected with the coronavirus, but I have the antibodies, right, on the test. Well, first of all, there's no data. There's no good data, but we don't know if having antibodies really protects you, first of all, because there's a threshold. You might need a certain number of antibodies. We don't know what that number is. Secondly, we don't know if when you have the antibodies, how long you will have protection, how long you'll be immune. And then lastly, if you've had COVID-19 and you recovered, the CDC just earlier today, basically, in a lecture suggested that you wait because reinfection is not common. And if it happens, it's not common within 90 days. But if you've had COVID-19, most likely you should get vaccinated 90 days or more after getting the disease. So you will have more immunity. In one of the trials, I think it's the Mrna vaccine, getting the vaccine gave you even more or better of an antibody response than getting the disease. So if you get the vaccine, you will be protected for longer, most likely, even though there's no data. Some physicians are recommending that if you've had COVID-19, that you wait for a better test for the titers to see what your antibody titers are 90 days after disease. And if you still have really high titers, and we think that in the next few months, maybe we will be able to know what level you need, then you might not have to get vaccinated. But right now, the CDC is suggestive of those patients getting vaccinated. So if you've had COVID-19 90 days after, you should probably get vaccinated. And if you get positive antibodies, still that doesn't mean 100% that that's going to stay or that you're completely protected. Another question that came up that I actually skipped here, but co-administration with other vaccines. So is it safe to get the COVID vaccine with your other vaccines if you are due for your shingles vaccine, or if you want to get the flu shot, which you shouldn't have gotten by now, or if you need to get any other shots? Well, first of all, as you might know, the vaccine has only been approved for patients that are 16 years old and older. So the pediatric population should not be given the COVID vaccine. Also, most kids fare very well with the disease, right? Although there are exceptions, and some kids get sick, some kids get very sick, but the vast majority of kids do not get sick from the disease. But right now, we know that they could spread the disease, though. Even though there's different studies, it's likely that kids can spread the disease. So at this point, this vaccine is only approved for patients that are 16 years and older. And interestingly, the older patients over the age of 55 had less side effects from the vaccine because their immune system, with age, everyone's immune system gets weaker, so it's less immunogenic. The vaccine is less immunogenic to them. It causes less of the side effects. So if you're over 55, you should even be less worried for those minor side effects of a few days of body aches or fever, etc., or headaches. But co-administration with other vaccines should not be done. So the CDC talk was saying that if you have to get other vaccines, they should be at least 14 days apart from this mRNA vaccine for COVID. So do not get the COVID vaccine with your flu shot on the same day. Do not get your COVID vaccine with any other vaccine on the same day, but you may get it 2 weeks apart. And only because we don't know. It just hasn't been studied, not because it's definitely dangerous. We just don't know. And we would want to know, which vaccine is causing side effects and what they are. So do not take two vaccines on the same day. The other question that's really important is this vaccine only going to help you, or is it going to protect you or prevent you from being contagious to spreading the virus? So if I get the vaccine, which I'm planning on doing as soon as Cedars-Sinai gives it to me, if I get the vaccine, right, am I contagious to my wife or to my kids or to my mom, to my patients, to my immunosuppressed patients, most importantly? Am I contagious? We don't know. We don't know that. The endpoint of the study and the trials was to look if the disease was not severe. So to see if you would get COVID-19, the disease from the virus. And it looks like 95% efficacy. If I get the vaccine, I'm most likely not going to feel anything. I'll be asymptomatic because of the vaccine. But can I still spread it? Can I still give, is there still transmission? And that's the million-dollar question. So we know it will help you, but we don't know if you get the vaccine, if it's going to help your significant other, your family, or patients. And so we're hoping it will. And a lot of doctors are very hopeful and think that it might, or likely it will, prevent transmission. But the trick is it going to stop the virus from replicating? And, so in a few months, we'll probably be able to know, and we'll do nasal swabs and see if, patients who've gotten the vaccine, if they have replication of the virus. But we don't know. But if that was the case, so if transmission or being contagious was stopped by the vaccine, that would be great, because what that would mean is that we would probably need less than 50%, or some doctors say much less, 20-30% of the population to get the vaccine, and we would already see an effect. We would see an effect with less disease, which is the most important thing. We would see an effect with less patients overwhelming our healthcare systems, which is a problem currently, obviously. In California, the ICU is only at 5% capacity, which is not good. But so we don't know if that's the case, but we're hoping. We do know it will decrease disease, and so we still need at least more than 50%, likely 70% of patients to get this vaccine for us to see a benefit again. The benefit in decrease in the pandemic, decrease in disease, decrease in death, decrease in healthcare pressure on the healthcare system, and increase in business. Increase in booming of the economy and businesses flourishing again. That's all important, obviously health being first, but all that is important, and this vaccine might help this a lot. The next question then that we have is, will getting the vaccine make me have to stop being socially, distancing myself socially, stop wearing the mask? No. So if you get the vaccine, especially because we don't know if transmission will go down, if we don't know if you'll be less contagious. For now, you still have to practice social distancing. You still have to wear a mask, stay 6 feet away, and do everything you're doing now. We're hoping, though, that the vaccine will help halt the pandemic, and it looks very hopeful. Last two questions that are important. So, are we going to have to repeat getting the COVID vaccine? Like the flu shot. Every year we get the influenza, the flu shot, right? Well, with the flu shot, the target of the vaccine is something that mutates every year. So the target changes, so we need a new vaccine. With the COVID-19 vaccine, our target is that S protein, and we don't think that one mutates. And since even SARS-CoV-1, so SARS-1, many years ago, that S protein has not changed significantly. So we're hopeful. We don't know yet 100%, but we're hopeful, and we don't think that you'll need an annual COVID shot, and that is good news as well. At least not with this mRNA vaccine. Again, amazing technology, and I'm extremely excited about the results thus far. And then one last question I want to address, and I know there are probably many more questions. We got so many questions, but I'll address them in future IG Live and Facebook Live Q&A sessions. I will also be talking for some of our autoimmune communities and societies soon. Those will be scheduled soon, and I'll let you know. But one question is, well, when can I get the vaccine? If I've convinced you that you should get the vaccine, and I will post myself getting the vaccine live as well, if I've convinced that you should get this COVID vaccine as soon as possible, and most of my colleagues are saying, gosh, I would get it tomorrow, or I would even pay for it if I had to, but getting the COVID vaccine, who will be first? Well, I think appropriately so, our frontline healthcare workers, number one, are true heroes working in the ICU, in the ER, nurses, doctors, respiratory therapists, everyone part of the team, every single person should get it first. And then all the other healthcare workers, everyone who sees patients, right? And then, of course, long-term facility and nursing home residents, so fragile, most of them multiple underlying conditions, and most of them very old and sick. So that is the order so far. And then I think what's going to happen is every state is going to decide, but then immunocompromised patients with diseases, and the elderly. will get it. And then essential workers, so important. Those essential workers that go out and risk their lives every day because they have to work. And then our younger, healthier population. And of course, 16 years and older. I hope I shed some light on this COVID-19 vaccine, again, that just got approval about 40 hours ago. And I highly encourage you to take the COVID vaccine if your own physician considers it safe for yourself. And if you have allergic diseases, unless it's anaphylaxis to anything in the vaccine, or if it's severe anaphylaxis to an injectable medicine, you should be okay to get this vaccine. I wish you guys all a healthy and happy holiday season. And stay safe, stay socially distanced to protect yourself and your loved ones and our community.